The South African Health Products Regulatory Authority has recommended that government lift the pause on administering Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine, on condition that certain conditions are met. This includes strengthened screening and monitoring of participants who are at a higher risk of blood clotting disorder. SAPRA says measures are to be implemented to ensure the safe management of any participants who develop vaccine-induced thrombosis. On Tuesday, South Africa temporarily suspended the rollout of the J&J vaccine. This after health agencies in the United States recommended pausing its use because of rare cases of blood clots in 6 people inoculated with it. Sunday, the 18th of April, Zimbabwe celebrates 41 years of independence from colonial rule. In the more than 4 decades, it is a country that has gone through quite a number of transitions, faced many challenges and enjoyed some successes too. Education there has seen the country enjoy one of the highest literacy rates on the continent, but the story has had its difficult times, particularly in politics and the economy. The Zimbabwean ambassador to South Africa, David Hamadziripi, spoke to my colleague Peter Ndoro and gave us his view on Zimbabwe at 41.
Your Excellency, the 18th of April is a big day in Zimbabwe's history, and this year celebrating 41 years of independence. Sadly, some might say that there's not much to celebrate, but maybe there are things to celebrate. What might those be?
Well, first and foremost, before I go into responding to your question, I think let me take this opportunity to wish the entire nation of Zimbabwe, starting of course with our head of state, President Mnangagwa, and everyone, every Zimbabwean, congratulations on the 41st anniversary of our independence. This is an independence anniversary that we are going to be celebrating under very different circumstances like everyone else throughout the world. We are going to be under COVID-19 measures to control the spread of this pandemic in the country. But we have as a theme, together growing our economy for a prosperous, resilient and inclusive society. And I think therein you find the aspiration and the reasons for us to celebrate on this occasion together, because without unity, we will not be able to achieve anything. Growing our economy, that is the biggest challenge and the biggest obligation that we have as Zimbabweans, as a nation, to grow our economy, grow it in an inclusive way, grow it so that it can be resilient as we face the various challenges, wins, and of course the current pandemic, which has created its own new challenges.
All right, so those are the visions for the future, but what would you say in the present? Because it sounds like from what you're saying, there's quite a lot to do. Does that mean that at this time that there's quite a lot in front of the people that they're still dealing with?
Indeed, there is quite a lot that we are having to deal with, as you are aware. And I think this is very important for us to always bear in mind that Zimbabwe is under sanctions. So we are not operating in an environment that is normal to everyone. But we are not going to be talking about that issue all the time, because we have a country to try and develop. We have a population whose aspirations and whose expectations the government is trying to meet. So we do have a huge task ahead of us. Let me give you some few examples. For instance, on the economy, as you may be aware, even though the inflation rate is falling fast and in a very impressive way, we still have a triple-digit inflation rate in Zimbabwe today. But thanks to the reforms that the government is taking, these reforms include fiscal policies, monetary policies, including the introduction of the foreign currency auction system. We have seen a stability returning to the economy. We have seen prices falling down. We have also seen an improvement in capacity utilization in industry, to the point that when you go into Zimbabwean supermarkets and shops, there is, in fact, an impressive increase in the number of locally produced goods in the market. So this is an improvement. But as I said, inflation is still very high. So government is going to continue pursuing those very strict, disciplined policies and measures to ensure that we bring down that level of inflation. When you look also at the infrastructure, this is a country, because of the sanctions that I referred to earlier, and indeed because of other policies that we may have taken, there hasn't been much, in fact, much investment in infrastructure development. You can look at the roads, you can look at the issue of dams, you can look even in the area of agriculture. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done in order to bring Zimbabwe to the vision that the government has, which is Vision 2030, bringing this country into an upper middle income society by 2030.
So you and I have both got grey hair, which means that we were old enough to remember Zimbabwe in 1980 as independence came. And at the time, there was a lot of hope. There was an excitement about what the future held, and a lot of promises made by the ruling party in particular about what Zimbabwe was going to be like. Do you think that in 41 years, Zimbabwe has been able to meet those hopes and expectations?
Let me say that in part, the government or the ruling party has managed to meet some of those aspirations. In part, clearly, we have not been able to meet those aspirations. And that's why we say today, Zimbabwe's economy is an economy in transition. When you look at the past 41 years, I think we have to be very honest and be a bit objective and say, when you look at, for instance, in the first 20 years of our independence, there was a lot of development, improvement in terms of access to education, access to health facilities, improvements in terms of even the infrastructure, agriculture. There was, as you say, there was that aspiration, that expectation, that celebration. And I think that celebration still continues today, because we have had one major development in the past 41 years in Zimbabwe, and this has been the transfer of land to its rightful owners. This is a very important element that we need to always bear in mind. What did we get in return for having taken that very significant historical decision to return the land to the people, to be true to the aspirations and the reasons for our liberation struggle? We got sanctions in place. And our agricultural development was stunted. Our development in various other areas was stunted because resources were no longer available for us to be able not just to maintain what we had, but even to improve on that which we had. And that is why today, a lot of people will talk in nostalgic terms about the Zimbabwe of 1980. But I think we need to look at the Zimbabwe of today. And the Zimbabwe of today is a Zimbabwe which is, in fact, using its own resources to improve that which we have and that which we need to do. We need also to accept the fact that we had those other years where we get a lot of conflict within the international community or some members of the international community. What is happening today is we see the government pursuing a policy of engagement and re-engagement. But this is not just with our external partners, even within the country. So we have issues that need also to be addressed. For instance, and I'm sure this would be one issue that will be raised, there are issues in our past which need to be resolved. There are conflicts in our past which need to be resolved. And the president has taken the bull by the horns and said, let's talk about the issues, for instance, of Bukurahundi. And we have the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission working on that. Traditional chiefs meetings and engagements have been held with populations and institutions and communities in the affected provinces. So there is that determination to address those issues of the past so that we can move forward in harmony and in unity.
So when you talk about dealing with past hurts like Gukurahundi, for example, people want to see justice. People might even want to see compensation, as happened in other parts of the world. Some people might even point to senior people in government today as being responsible for that massacre. How will that be dealt with?
As I indicated, you do have a process that is already underway. There is dialogue that is going on involving institutions of the state and the communities that have been affected. So there is no shying away from these issues. They are not easy issues. These are complex, very sensitive, very difficult issues. But what is important to underline is a process is commenced, and we cannot, of course, prejudge the outcome of that process. But that dialogue, we all need to engage in it genuinely and sincerely, and with a real desire to achieve an outcome that will be amicable to all, but which will also promote the unity of the country.
You mentioned a number of sectors, education, health. Let me start with health, because again, you might say people are being nostalgic, but at one stage, Zimbabwe's health sector really was a pride on the continent. State-of-the-art hospitals, doctors, nurses, the highest quality in the world. But there was a point in time when Zimbabwe's biggest hospital was shut for a number of months. And now we have commonly happening is health workers on strike over pay and working conditions. It seems as if the health sector has all but collapsed.
I would not agree with the characterization that the health sector has collapsed. But what I can certainly agree with is the view that our health sector is not as robust or as strong as it used to be. But again, let me just put in context the issue of sanctions. As I said, I'm sorry, I'll have to come back to that issue because of the sanctions, we have not been able to have the sufficient resources, as I mentioned earlier, not just to maintain the existing facilities and systems, but also to be able to improve on that which we have. I can tell you it is the deepest desire of the government of Zimbabwe to ensure that we have world-class health facilities that will cater to the needs and interests of our population. In any case, we need a healthy population in order to achieve our development goals. We are working on improving this health system. Remember also, because of that deterioration that took place, we have also seen health personnel, medical doctors leaving the system. Certainly this has had an impact, but I am happy to say that we are seeing some of those people, specialists, coming back to give into the health system. Let me make mention at this point in time, given the context of the pandemic that we are facing, how have we performed as a country in dealing with the COVID pandemic? Like everybody else, we have put in place measures to reduce the transmission of the pandemic. And if you permit me, let me just look at my notes here. And I can tell you, as of this morning, it's been reported we have 37,534 cases that were reported, 1,551 deaths, unfortunately, 34,981 recoveries, which means today we have about 1,002 active cases. But the good news, Mr. Ndoro, is that we also now have a vaccination program underway in Zimbabwe. In that vaccination program, we has actually seen 269,732 people vaccinated with the first dose. and 34,969 fully vaccinated. I think given the state of our health sector, this is commendable, but it also underlines the real commitment and determination of the government to ensure that we protect our population, but also to ensure that we do deliver to the extent that we can with the resources that we have, the best that we can to our population. And our aspiration is indeed that we are going to have health facilities that compare with the rest in the world. And as part of our investment projects, certainly health facilities are one of the areas where we are looking for investment, both by our own people and certainly also by foreign investors.
What do you do about the healthcare workers? Because they're saying, you know, when they compare themselves with other doctors, not even abroad, but just in the region, they're not being paid a fair wage. Nurses are saying they're not being paid a fair wage. They complain about protective equipment on the front line of fighting this pandemic. How do you deal with those issues? Because those are immediate and urgent.
Oh, indeed, and as you may be aware, our Minister of Health, who is also our Vice President, has been engaging all the stakeholders in the health sector in order to address these issues that have to do with the welfare of the health workers, that have to do with the working environment of the health workers, because they are doing a splendid job under difficult conditions, like many other health workers throughout the world, where they are indeed in the front line of this fight against the pandemic. So there is regular and continuous dialogue between the government and the health workers. Where we may not be able to meet their expectations, it certainly is not because the government does not wish to do so, but it is because there may be constraints. Let me also hasten to note in this context the support that Zimbabwe is receiving from various partners, international partners, including private foundations in support of the health sector. And government is engaging these partners because we certainly would wish to also mobilize as many resources as we can in order to support this very critical sector.
Let's move to the political environment. And the country's gone through a number of transitions. There was the ZANU and ZAPU merger in 1987. We saw the formation of the MDC in 1999. Then there was the coalition government, 2009. And then we entered the post-Mugabe era after the president had been in power for so long in 2017. But one of the things that we've seen over time has been political unrest. We hear stories of political opponents being harassed, being jailed, and more recently, one sees opposition members being removed from parliament and fingers are pointed at the head of state for interfering in opposition politics.
Well, Mr. Ndoro, what I can assure you and inform all viewers is that the president is deeply and personally committed to ensuring that there is, in fact, political openness, there is unity, and there is normal political interaction as you would find in any democratic society. So what did he do? If you may recall, and I think people have to be objective, when we held the elections in 2018, everybody right across the board commented about the openness, the transparency, the very different positive environment in which those elections were held. This was thanks to the orientation that the president had already set to say we want to have a very open and very normal political environment to work in. Even after that, you have the president taking the initiative to creating a forum in which political actors, political leaders could come together and talk about the national issues in a non-conflictual manner. Some among us in Zimbabwe have spurned this invitation, but this has not stopped this particular process to go on. I think one of the problems that we have faced in Zimbabwe is this polarization and perhaps identification of an individual more in terms of their political beliefs rather than in terms of them being citizens of Zimbabwe. So when you do get somebody who breaks the law and they have to face the law, many a time they are first given a label, a political label, to say these activists or this person who is affiliated with this organization is being harassed, is being arrested. But that is not how the law is working. It has absolutely no such distinction. So I think it will be very helpful for us as Zimbabweans to first and foremost look at each other, and particularly also the media, would appeal to the media to not start giving these labels which accentuate political affiliations over the fact of us being first and foremost Zimbabweans and Zimbabwean citizens. We have to observe the law, whether I am belonging to this party or whether I have a certain attachment to this particular cause. But the fact remains that we are citizens first and foremost.
You talk about observing the law, but that would include the authorities as well. And they've been accused of human rights abuses. We saw citizens get shot by soldiers soon after the elections. And even a year later, demonstrators physically beaten up. We see pictures of women being beaten, kicked by police officers. We see stories of abductions, state-sponsored abductions, it's alleged. Surely, when you say the law applies, it must also apply to the authorities, because it seems as if there's one law for certain citizens and another law for those in authority.
That is the allegation that is made. That is the sense that some want to draw from what they observe from their standpoint in Zimbabwe. But the fact, as I indicated, the fact of the matter is indeed the law applies to all. And we are aware that after the incidents of August 2018, we have had a commission of inquiry, and the government is certainly going to be looking into implementing those conclusions. The government has, if it had no intention of actually applying the law to even those who are in the security services who may have been alleged to have carried out those incidents, it would not have set up that commission in the first place. So there is a process that will, of course, take place in order for that law to be applied. What I would like to emphasize is that the government respects the law. And when we talk of human rights, we need to also talk about human rights in all their dimensions. So human rights is not just issues of political and civil rights, but we also talk about human rights to do with economic and social rights of the people. You may recall our government had been accused of not having an open system of putting in place legislation that muzzled the free expression of people's views. But when you look at, for instance, the press, the media in Zimbabwe, and some of the articles that are published, it is a free media. You have had reforms in the media sector. You've had reforms to do with AIPAS in the security sector. These have not, in my view and in our view, have actually not been given the same type of acknowledgement as there is the quickness to make accusations. And I think there's need for that balance to say there are things that the government is doing well. Certainly, there are things that we need to look into in order to improve on them. And there is that willingness and readiness to improve on those things. But clearly, these things may take some time because there are processes that need to be followed in order to be able to achieve that objective.
You mentioned the media, and we'll use Hopewell Chinono's case because it was well publicized. Denied bail several times, jailed 3 times in 6 months. And then he was arrested and charged with a law that doesn't exist. This looks like harassment. And all he says he did was report on corruption, to a point that even the health minister that he reported on has been brought to book. So, to suggest that journalists are not under pressure perhaps is not being fair with the truth, Ambassador.
Well, look, you have the case of Mr. Hopewell Chinono, but how many journalists do you have in Zimbabwe? And how many of those have actually been, as you put it, harassed? To my knowledge, actually, you have a very open space, media space, where genuinely, if someone is carrying out their profession, they have not been hindered from carrying out their profession as journalists. But if you do break the law, and I'm sure you will agree with me, if you do break the law, whether you are a journalist or you are in any other profession, I think the law has to certainly be applied. We come back to the same issue that I mentioned earlier, which is we then make certain labels and designations because perhaps there is a certain objective that we want to achieve in making that particular designation and labeling. Zimbabwe is often portrayed. In fact, when you read what's in the media, it's not what is there on the ground. And this is a fact. Many people have remarked to me to say, Mr. Ambassador, we have been here and we recently traveled to your country. And what we saw is very different from what we read in the media. So I will merely leave it at that. And to say, in fact, the reforms that the government has undertaken have not been quite fully acknowledged. And one always wonders why. Why is it that what the good that we are doing as a government, the positive that we are doing as a government is not acknowledged? I know, of course, you do good things 10 times and only once you fall afoul, and that is what tends to be highlighted. But that is the reality, and the government, I can confirm, is committed to ensuring that indeed we are going to have a fully democratic society, and we certainly expect that the citizenry also, because they are part of that process, not just beneficiaries, but they are part of that process. It's not just up to government, but it is up to every Zimbabwean to work towards ensuring that we do achieve those aspirations in the democratic society.
All right, you talk again about democratic space, and some again say, but this democratic space is shrinking. When we look at someone like Job Sikala, for example, a senior figure in the opposition, he's been arrested nearly 70 times, and he hasn't been convicted of anything. Some people would say that this is just harassment. Why would someone be arrested 70 times and not be convicted of anything? Then you have this Patriot bill that's on the table, and you can be arrested for things like insulting the president. Is that the kind of freedom of expression that should be existing?
Well, about Mr. Job Sikala, I wasn't aware of that. But concerning the Patriot bill, this is a proposal. It is before Parliament. It is going to be debated. And I think ideas can be bandied around. Ideas can be presented, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all those ideas are going to be adopted. I think we need to wait and see what the Patriot Bill is going to be like after the deliberations have been concluded. And then I think we can make some commentary on it. Again, what is important to note here is it's not an imposition. This is a proposal which is going to be subject to discussion. Viewpoints are certainly going to be aired, and those which in a majority support will certainly carry the day. And then we'll see what the final product will be like.
The president has talked a great deal about dealing with corruption. Earlier, you talked about the challenges that the country is facing, and it sounds as if there could be some of those that are self-inflicted wounds, corruption being one of them, and the president saying that he wants to fight it. You know, to have senior political figures arrested at airports smuggling gold is quite a remarkable thing. To have health ministers arrested for corruption, particularly with protective equipment, is a remarkable thing. Is government serious about dealing with corruption, particularly at the highest places?
Absolutely. The government is committed to dealing with corruption. You have just mentioned yourself 2 cases of senior people who have been arrested, and certainly their cases are before the courts. You have a Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission that has now been empowered, capacitated to be able to carry out its duty. Corruption is not unique to Zimbabwe. Corruption is found in all societies, but it is how we try to deal with that cancer. And the president and the government of Zimbabwe, they've taken the position that this has to be rooted out. The fact that you do have an anti-corruption campaign and you have the necessary institutions doesn't necessarily mean that there will be no corruption. Just the fact also that you have the police force and you have the courts doesn't mean that you have rooted out criminality. But what it shows is there is that deep intention to ensure that we deal with this, we identify it as a problem, and we want to deal with it. And every citizen has got a role to play. It's not just a matter of policing. Who is carrying out the corruption? It's individuals, isn't it? It's citizens, isn't it? It doesn't matter what station in life they sit at. And it is the responsibility of each and everyone to desist from corruption, to report corruption wherein they are aware of it, but not just report for sensational purposes, but to actually have the evidence which the institutions can work on and deal with that particular incident.
What do you say to people who say that the judiciary in part has been captured because of some of the decisions, denying people bail, which they're constitutionally allowed to, and in the end, as you say, certain cases, certain judgments are thrown out by higher courts. What would you say to people who say that the judiciary in part has been captured by the state?
Look, the judiciary has got people who are there to deliver justice. These are not infallible beings. They can make mistakes. And the mere fact that a judge has made a mistake, whether it's interpretation of the law, whether it's in terms of the judgment that they give, doesn't necessarily mean that the judiciary is captured. You always get or tend to get this accusation when somebody had expected a certain outcome and they get a different outcome. But when they do get the type of outcome that they want, you never hear about this charge that the judiciary is captured. So shall we also say, if indeed we have a judgment which is against the government, then we could also say as government, this judiciary is captured? No, it shouldn't work that way. I think what is important is we all need, all of those people who go before the courts of law, we all need to give our best confidence in the judiciary that they are going to treat each and every one of us fairly and equally and squarely. There is division of powers within Zimbabwe. In the Zimbabwean constitution, there is the judiciary, which is independent. You do have an executive and you have the legislature, and the government respects that division of power and authority in the country.
When we started this conversation, you talked about unity, working together. It is clear, and I don't think it's something that one can deny, is that Zimbabwe is divided in many ways, and sometimes it's along political lines, but they're very definitely different camps. You're either with the government and the ruling party, or you're not. And there doesn't seem to be a middle ground so much in recent decades of politics. How do you plan to bring the people of the country together under the flag?
In the first place, you have at the political level, the president has taken the initiative of creating the forum that I referred to earlier, which is the Political Actors Dialogue, COLAD in short. This is intended to then give the necessary message to the various members of these political parties that indeed our common message is a common message of unity. It's a common message of harmony. So that's at the political level. How are we also trying to bring about this unity? You have within the Constitution of Zimbabwe the provision on devolution. And the government has now, in fact, allocated resources in order to ensure that we do implement this devolution policy. What is going to be the significance of the devolution policy? The significance of it is, first, you are going to be getting at the local community level decisions being taken as to what is most important for them, what they would wish to see by way of development projects at that level. But what it also does is it ensures that we don't leave anyone behind. We don't leave any region behind. We don't leave any province behind as we carry out national development. And this will certainly contribute to that sense of oneness, to that sense of unity. So at various levels, be it at the political level, be it in terms of the economic development programs, government is actually preaching and sending out the word about the need for unity. And without unity, clearly we cannot progress. And it is because of this consciousness that there is this deep polarization, which is unhealthy totally, that there are all these efforts that are being made by government to bring about real harmony. And it's not unity in terms of us sharing the same views or viewpoints, no, but unity in terms of having this sense of oneness, sense of purpose, so that we can achieve a great and prosperous Zimbabwe.
The vision for the future. What will Zimbabwe look like if all the plans and strategies that the president has on his desk come into play?
In the immediate, this is our Vision 2030. And in short, it's encapsulated in the phrase that we are looking at a Zimbabwe that is in the upper middle income society or economy. So we are looking at a Zimbabwe where, in fact, you have a stable currency, where you have infrastructure that compares not just favorably with the region, but with the world. You are looking at a Zimbabwe where there is harmony and unity, and where we have institutions that are able to deliver services to the citizenry. So that is the vision of the president, and a Zimbabwe which is inclusive in terms of its development right throughout the country. And we are working towards that. You have certainly been seeing the president has been commissioning quite a number of projects in the water sector, in the transport sector, in the ICT sector. So brick by brick, step by step, we are going to get there. And I am sure that the majority of the Zimbabwean citizens will be supporting these processes, because we need everybody behind this task.